The Velthari Empire had ruled the Orion sector for 3,000 years. Their ships were the fastest. Their weapons were the deadliest. Their soldiers were the most feared. When they spoke, smaller species listened. When they demanded, smaller species obeyed. This was the way of things, and the Velthari believed it would always be so. Then they met humanity. It was a meeting that would change everything. Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. They were none of these things, but they had something the Velthari could not understand, something that would bring an empire to its knees. The first contact happened on a small planet called Nexus 7. It was a trading world, neutral ground where many species came to buy and sell goods. The Velthari had a station there, as did many other races. Among those races were the Keth, a small and gentle people with blue skin and large eyes. The Keth were traders and healers. They had no warships. They had no weapons. They believed in peace and kindness above all things. The humans arrived at Nexus 750 years before the events that would shake the galaxy. They came in old ships held together with hope and wire. They had little to trade and even less to offer. Most species ignored them. The Velthari laughed at them, but the Keth welcomed them. A Keth merchant named Thalo was the first to approach the human traders. He saw that they were hungry and tired. He saw that their children were thin and their elders were sick. Without asking for anything in return, Thalo gave them food. He gave them medicine. He gave them a place to stay in his own home. The human captain was a woman named Sarah Chen. She had led her people across the stars, searching for a new home after Earth became too crowded. She looked at Thalo with tears in her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why help us? You don't know us. We have nothing to give you." Thalo smiled his gentle Keth smile. "You needed help. That is enough reason." From that day forward, the humans and the Keth were friends. It was not a political alliance. It was not a treaty signed by diplomats. It was something deeper. It was the kind of friendship that grows when one people saves another in their darkest hour. Years passed. The humans grew stronger. They built better ships. They found new technologies. They spread across a dozen worlds, but they never forgot the Keth. Every human child learned the story of Thalo and Sarah Chen. Every human knew that when they had nothing, the Keth had given them everything. The Keth homeworld was called Kethos. It was a beautiful planet of blue oceans and green forests. The Keth had lived there for 10,000 years, and they had kept it clean and peaceful. They had no army because they had never needed one. They had no enemies because they had never made any. Or so they thought. The Velthari Empire had always looked at Kethos with greedy eyes. The planet sat at a perfect position in space, a crossroads between three major trade routes. More importantly, it had rare minerals deep in its crust, minerals that could power Velthari warships for centuries. For a long time, the Velthari left Kethos alone. The Keth were useful as traders and healers. They served the Empire well in their small way, but as the Empire's wars grew larger, they needed more resources. They needed more power. They needed Kethos. High Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Claw. He was tall even for a Velthari, with gray scales and yellow eyes that held no warmth. He had conquered 12 worlds. He had killed millions. He felt nothing. "The Keth have refused our offer," his aide reported. Zorath's thin lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. As expected, they are fools. They think their friendship with the humans will save them. "The humans have grown strong, Commander. Their fleet is not small. Their fleet is nothing compared to ours, and they are far away. By the time they learn what has happened, Kethos will be ours." The aide hesitated. "Sir, the intelligence reports say that humans are unpredictable. They do not always act in their own interest." Zorath turned his cold eyes on the aide. "All species act in their own interest. The humans will calculate the cost of war with us. They will see that they cannot win. They will accept reality as all species do." "But sir," Enough, begin the invasion. The Velthari fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Kethos on a quiet morning. There were 40 warships, each one bristling with weapons. Against them the Keth had nothing. No warships, no defense platforms, no way to fight back. The Keth Council sent a message to the Velthari flagship. The message was simple and dignified. They asked for mercy. They offered to negotiate. They reminded the Velthari that the Keth had always been peaceful neighbors. Zoreth did not respond. Instead, he gave an order. The first shot struck the capital city of Kethos. Buildings that had stood for thousands of years crumbled to dust. Gardens that had been tended by countless generations burned to ash. And the Keth, the gentle blue-skinned people who had never raised a hand against anyone, began to die. Some tried to flee. Their small trading ships were not made for speed or for battle. The Velthari gunships hunted them down one by one. Some tried to hide in caves and underground shelters. The Velthari sent soldiers to find them. Some simply stood in the streets and looked up at the sky, unable to understand why this was happening. The massacre lasted 3 days. When it was over, 7 billion Keth were dead. The cities were ruins. The forests were burning. The oceans were choked with ash and debris. Kethos, the beautiful blue and green world, was gray and silent. But not all the Keth had died. Thalos' grandson, a young Keth named Ren, had been off-world when the attack began. He was on a trading mission to a human colony called New Geneva. When the news reached him, he collapsed. He could not speak. He could not move. He could only weep. The humans of New Geneva gathered around him. They held him as he cried. They stayed with him through the long, dark night. And when morning came, the governor of New Geneva, a woman named Maria Santos, came to see him. "Ren," she said softly, "I have a message for you to send to your people, to any Keth who survived." Ren looked up at her with empty eyes. "What message? There is nothing left." Maria Santos took his hand. Her voice was steady, but there was fire in her eyes. "Tell them to find shelter. Tell them to hide. Tell them to wait." "Wait for what?" Maria Santos stood. Behind her, through the window, Ren could see human ships lifting off, dozens of them, hundreds, rising into the sky like angry stars. "Tell them," Maria Santos said, "that humanity remembers its friends." The first human warship arrived at what was left of Kethos 4 days later. It was a small scout vessel, not meant for battle. Its captain was a young man named James Park. His grandmother had known Sarah Chen. His family had grown up on stories of Keth kindness. James Park looked at the ruined world below him. He saw the burned cities. He saw the mass graves. He saw the Velthari flag flying over the ashes of the Keth capital. He opened a channel to Earth Command. "This is Scout Ship Aurora," he said. His voice did not shake. "Reporting on Kethos, the Velthari have committed genocide. I count no living Keth on the surface. Repeat, no living Keth. The planet is dead." There was a long silence. Then a voice came back. It was the voice of Admiral Chen, Sarah Chen's great-great-granddaughter. She had risen to command the entire human fleet. She had never forgotten where her family came from. "Aurora, return to base. All ships, all fleets, all colonies. This is Admiral Chen with an emergency broadcast to all humanity." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was iron and ice and fire. "The Keth saved us when we had nothing. They asked for nothing in return. They were our first friends among the stars, and the Velthari Empire has murdered them. Every man, woman, and child. 7 billion souls who never harmed anyone." Another pause. "I am calling for a vote of the Human Council. I am asking for a declaration of total war against the Velthari Empire, not for territory, not for resources, not for power, for justice, for vengeance, for our friends." The vote took less than 1 hour. It was unanimous. The Velthari Empire received the human declaration of war with amusement. High Commander Zoreth read it twice, then laughed. They threaten us, the humans, with their tiny fleet and their primitive weapons. His advisors shifted uncomfortably. Commander, the humans have grown stronger than we thought. Our intelligence was outdated. How much stronger? They have 300 warships now, and their industrial capacity is surprising. Zoreth waved a clawed hand. 300 ships against our 3,000. Let them come. We will crush them as we crushed the Keth. But as the weeks passed, strange reports began to arrive. Human colonies were mobilizing, not just their military but everyone. Factories that made farming equipment were now making weapons. Schools were teaching tactics and strategy. Old men and young children were learning to pilot ships. The Velthari spy network, usually so reliable, began to fail. Human counterintelligence found and captured agent after agent. Those agents were not tortured or killed. They were simply shown images of Kethos, images of dead Keth children, images of burned cities and mass graves. Then they were released. Go back to your masters, the humans told them. Tell them what you saw, tell them we are coming. The first battle happened at a small Velthari outpost called Fortress Khan. It was a minor target, barely defended. The Velthari expected maybe a dozen human ships. 50 ships dropped out of hyperspace. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Fortress Khan was gone, not captured, not occupied, gone. The humans had reduced it to rubble, then reduced the rubble to dust. They left one survivor, a young Velthari soldier who had hidden in an escape pod. Tell your empire, the human commander said over the radio. Tell them this is for the Keth. Tell them we are just getting started. High Commander Zoreth received this news with growing unease. He sent a fleet of 100 ships to hunt down the human raiders. They found the humans at a place called the Crimson Nebula. The battle was fierce. The Velthari had superior numbers. They had superior firepower. They should have won easily. They did not win. The humans fought like nothing the Velthari had ever seen. They did not retreat when outgunned. They did not surrender when surrounded. They flew their damaged ships directly into Velthari vessels. They ejected from dying craft and kept fighting with hand weapons. They died with curses on their lips and fire in their eyes. Of the 100 Velthari ships, 60 were destroyed. The rest fled. Of the 50 human ships, 40 were destroyed. But the next week, 100 more human ships arrived. And the week after that, 200 more. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Friend. It was a new ship, built specifically for this war. Its hull was painted with Keth symbols, and its name was written in both human and Keth script. Status report, she said. Ma'am, all units are in position. The attack on Velthari Forward Base 7 will begin in 6 hours. Chen nodded. She looked out at the stars, thinking of her ancestor Sarah, thinking of Thalo, thinking of 7 billion gentle souls who had done nothing wrong. Send a message to all ships, she said. Tell them to remember why we fight, not for glory, not for power, for friendship, for the Keth, for justice. She turned to face her crew. And tell them that the Velthari will learn what it means to make an enemy of humanity. They will learn that our friendship is eternal, and they will learn that our vengeance is worse. The crew cheered. The war had truly begun. Ren, the young Keth survivor, had found others like him. Scattered across the galaxy in trading posts and on distant colonies, a few thousand Keth had escaped the massacre. They were broken. They were lost. They had nowhere to go. The humans took them in. Every human colony opened its doors. Every human world offered shelter. It did not matter that the Keth had no way to repay them. It did not matter that taking in refugees would strain their resources. What mattered was that the Keth were friends, and humans do not abandon their friends. On New Geneva, a Keth refugee center was built. It was simple at first, just tents and temporary shelters, but within months it had grown into a small city. The humans gave the Keth everything they needed: food, medicine, homes, safety. More than that, they gave them purpose. "We cannot fight," Ren told Governor Santos. "We are not warriors, we never have been." Maria Santos smiled sadly. "We know, and we would never ask you to become something you are not, but there are other ways to help." The Keth became healers for the human wounded. They became counselors for soldiers haunted by what they had seen. They became record keepers, documenting every crime the Velthari had committed so that the galaxy would never forget. And every day, more humans came to the refugee center, not to help but to learn. "Teach us about your people," they said. "Teach us your stories, your songs, your history. The Velthari tried to erase you from existence. We will not let that happen." Ren found himself teaching human children about Keth culture. He told them about Thalo, his grandfather who had welcomed the first humans. He told them about the beautiful cities of Kethos, now turned to ash. He told them about the Keth way of peace and kindness. The children listened with wide eyes, and when Ren was done, a small girl raised her hand. "Mr. Ren," she said, "when we beat the bad guys, will you help us build Kethos again?" Ren could not speak. Tears rolled down his blue cheeks. He could only nod. The war continued, and humanity, once laughed at by the Velthari, proved to be an enemy unlike any other. High Commander Zorath was no longer laughing. He stood in the war room of the Imperial Palace, staring at a map that showed nothing but bad news. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They were nothing, they were insects." His generals had no answers. The humans had taken 12 Velthari worlds in 6 months. Their fleet, which should have been destroyed a dozen times over, kept growing. For every ship they lost, they built 2 more. "They are not fighting like a normal enemy," one general said carefully. "They take no prisoners, they accept no surrender, they do not stop." "All enemies can be stopped," Zorath growled. "Commander, with respect, I do not think these enemies can be." Zorath struck the general across the face. "You speak like a coward. The Velthari Empire has never been defeated." But even as he said the words, Zorath felt doubt creeping into his hearts. The reports were clear. Human forces were not just winning battles. They were winning them in impossible ways. At the Battle of Iron Gate, a human captain had crashed her crippled ship into a Velthari command station rather than retreat. The station was destroyed. So were the 50 ships docked there. At the siege of Valos Prime, human soldiers had held a single building against 1,000 Velthari troops for 9 days. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found only 3 humans still alive, but around them were 800 Velthari dead. At the crossing of stars, a human fleet had faced a force 3 times its size. They had not run. They had not hidden. They had charged directly into the heart of the Velthari formation, dying by the hundreds, but taking the Velthari flagship with them. These were not the actions of a rational enemy. These were the actions of people who did not care if they lived or died, as long as they took their enemies with them. What the Velthari did not understand was that this was not madness. This was something far more dangerous. This was love. Love for the Keth who had saved them. Love for the memory of kindness in a cold universe. The humans were not fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting for something that could not be measured or counted or weighed. They were fighting for their friends. And they would not stop until justice was done. The Emperor himself summoned Zorath to the throne room. The Emperor was ancient, even for a Velthari. His scales were pale and thin, and his eyes had the clouded look of someone who had seen too much. He had ruled for 200 years, and he had never known defeat. "Explain," the Emperor said, "one word, one command." Zorath bowed low. "Your Majesty, the humans are more dangerous than we anticipated, but they can still be defeated. We simply need more forces, more resources." You destroyed a helpless world, the Emperor interrupted. You killed billions who could not fight back, and now their friends have come for us. Zorath straightened. The Keth were weak, their destruction was efficient, it secured valuable territory and resources. And what has it cost us? Zorath was silent. I will tell you what it has cost us, the Emperor said. 12 worlds, 300 ships, 2 million soldiers, and the humans are still coming. They do not negotiate. They do not tire. They do not stop. He leaned forward on his throne. You woke something, Commander. You kicked a sleeping beast because you thought it was weak, and now that beast is tearing our empire apart. We can still win, Zorath insisted. We have more ships, more soldiers. Do we? The Emperor's voice was cold. Our shipyards cannot match their production. Our soldiers are terrified. Our allies are abandoning us. The humans have offered them a simple deal: stay neutral and live. Help the Velthari and burn. He rose from his throne, an ancient figure of fated power. You have doomed us, Zorath. The Velthari Empire has stood for 3,000 years, and you have destroyed it for a planet full of peaceful merchants. Zorath felt something he had never felt before: fear. What would you have me do, Your Majesty? The Emperor turned away. Fight, die, it does not matter. The humans will come regardless, and when they do, they will not stop until every Velthari who had a hand in the Kethos massacre is dead. He paused at the door. I only hope they show our civilians more mercy than you showed theirs. Admiral Chen received the latest battle reports with grim satisfaction. The war was going well, too well, some said, but Chen knew the truth. They were paying for every victory in blood. She walked through the medical bay of the Eternal Friend, looking at the wounded. Human soldiers who had given limbs, eyes, years of their lives to this war. Some would recover, some would not. A young man lay in one of the beds. Both his legs were gone, but when he saw Admiral Chen, he tried to sit up and salute. At ease, Chen said quickly, rest, you've done enough. The young man shook his head. With respect, Admiral, I haven't done enough until it's over. What's your name, soldier? Park, ma'am, Thomas Park. My grandfather was James Park, the scout pilot who first reported on Kethos. Chen felt a chill. I knew your grandfather's name, he was a hero. He died last year, ma'am, natural causes, but before he died he made me promise something. What? Thomas Park's eyes were bright with tears and fire. He made me promise to be there when we took the Velthari homeworld. He wanted a Park to see justice done. He looked down at his missing legs. I'm going to keep that promise, ma'am, even if I have to crawl. Chen took his hand. You won't have to crawl, soldier. We'll carry you if we must. Every human who wants to see this through will see it through. She left the medical bay and returned to the bridge. Her first officer was waiting. Ma'am, we've received a transmission from the Velthari. They're requesting negotiations. Chen raised an eyebrow. Negotiations. They want to discuss terms. They're offering to return Kethos and pay reparations. For a long moment, Chen was silent. She thought of Ren and the survivors. She thought of the children in the refugee center, learning Keth songs. She thought of 7 billion souls who had simply wanted to live in peace. Return Kethos, she said slowly. A dead world, a graveyard. They think they can give back ashes and call it justice. What should I tell them, ma'am? Chen turned to face the stars. Tell them this: we did not come for Kethos, we came for the Keth. And since they cannot return the Keth to us, they have nothing we want, except their surrender, unconditional, total. Every war criminal delivered to face judgment, every record of their crimes made public, every ship and weapon destroyed. She paused. And if they refuse, tell them we will continue until there is nothing left to refuse with. The first officer hesitated. Ma'am, those terms, they'll never accept them. I know, Admiral Chen said, but I want them to understand something. This is not a war for territory or resources. This is not a war that can be ended with treaties and compromises. This is a war of justice, and justice cannot be negotiated. The message was sent. The Velthari refused. The war continued. 3 years had passed since the massacre of Kethos, 3 years of blood and fire and vengeance. The Velthari Empire, once the mightiest power in the Orion sector, was crumbling. Their outer colonies had fallen. Their fleet was half the size it had been. Their allies had abandoned them. And still the humans came, relentless and unstoppable. High Commander Zorath stood trial before the Imperial Council. The charges were simple: incompetence and genocide. The first was a military matter. The second was something new, something the Velthari had never cared about before. But the humans cared, and the humans were winning. "You have brought ruin upon us," the council speaker declared. "You murdered innocents and made us enemies of a species that does not know how to stop fighting. What do you have to say?" Zorath stood tall. Even now, even facing death, he felt no regret. "I did what was necessary," he said. "The Keth were in our way. I removed them. If the humans had been rational, they would have accepted reality." "The humans are not rational," the speaker said. "They are loyal. There is a difference. Loyalty is a weakness. Loyalty is why we are losing." The council voted. Zorath was found guilty. His sentence was death. But before the sentence could be carried out, human ships appeared in orbit around the Imperial homeworld. Hundreds of them. The final battle had begun. Admiral Chen led the assault personally. The Eternal Friend was at the head of the fleet, its Keth symbols gleaming in the light of the Velthari sun. "All ships," Chen said calmly, "engage." The battle for the Velthari homeworld lasted 12 hours. It was the bloodiest battle in human history. Ships died by the dozens. Soldiers died by the thousands. But in the end, the human flag flew over the Imperial Palace. The Emperor surrendered. He was brought before Admiral Chen in chains, an ancient figure who had once ruled 1,000 worlds. "I surrender," he said simply. "My forces are yours, my worlds are yours. What are your terms?" Chen looked at him for a long moment. "There is one term," she said, "justice." The Velthari war criminals were tried by a joint court of humans and representatives from other species the Velthari had wronged. The trials were fair. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdicts were severe. The galaxy watched these trials. Every species, every world, every sentient being who could receive transmissions watched as the mighty Velthari were held accountable for their crimes. They saw that the humans did not torture their prisoners. They saw that the humans gave fair trials, even to those who deserved none. They saw that human vengeance was terrible but just. And they learned something important. Human anger could be satisfied. Human vengeance could end, but only when justice was served. Only when the guilty paid for their crimes, only when the debt of blood was balanced. High Commander Zorath was executed for the genocide of Kethos. So were the captains who had led the massacre, the soldiers who had hunted down civilians, the officials who had ordered the attack. The Emperor himself was spared execution. He was too old, the court decided, and had not personally ordered the genocide. Instead, he was exiled to a small moon where he would live out his remaining years in solitude, contemplating what his empire had done and what it had cost. The Velthari Empire was dissolved. Its worlds became independent or joined other alliances. Its military was disbanded. Its weapons were destroyed. And Kethos, the dead world, was given to the surviving Keth. Ren stood on the surface of his homeworld for the first time since the massacre. The air was still thin and bitter. The soil was still gray with ash. But somewhere, somehow, a single flower had begun to grow. He knelt beside it, touching its petals with trembling fingers. Admiral Chen stood behind him. She had come personally to see this moment. "We cannot bring them back," she said softly. "We cannot undo what was done, but we can rebuild, we can remember, and we can make sure it never happens again." Ren stood. There were tears on his face, but also something else: hope. "Your people saved us twice," he said. "Once when we had nothing, and once when we had less than nothing." Chen shook her head. "Your people saved us first. We just returned the favor." This was more than a favor. This was. I don't have words for what this was. "Then let me give you some," Chen said. She took Ren's hand. "This is what happens when you make a friend of a human. We don't forget. We can't forget. Loyalty is written into our bones, passed down through generations. Your grandfather saved my ancestor, and so my family and his family and all of humanity became your family forever." She looked up at the gray sky, where human ships still orbited, keeping watch. "The Velthari thought they understood us. They thought we were just another species acting in our own interest, willing to accept reality. They were wrong. They didn't understand that for humans, friendship is not a strategy. It is not a calculation. It is a sacred thing, stronger than fear, stronger than death." She smiled, but there was iron in that smile. "And they certainly didn't understand what happens to anyone who harms our friends." Ren looked at the flower growing in the ash. It was small and fragile, but it was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, life was returning to Kethos. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we rebuild," Chen said. "Human engineers are already on their way. We'll clean the atmosphere, restore the soil, replant the forests. It will take generations, but we will make Kethos beautiful again. And when it is ready, your people will come home." "Not all of them," Ren said quietly. "Most of them are gone forever." "Yes," Chen agreed. "And every human child will learn their names. Every human school will teach about Kethos. The Keth will never be forgotten. That is our promise. That is our gift." Ren was silent for a long moment. "The other species," he finally said. "They are afraid of you now. They saw what you did to the Velthari. They saw your vengeance." "Good," Chen said. "Fear is a useful thing. It keeps people from making foolish decisions. But you are not monsters. You are kind. You are generous. You took in my people when no one else would." "We are both," Chen said. "That is what makes us human. We can love with all our hearts and hate with all our souls. We can build and we can destroy. We can show mercy and we can show none." She met Ren's eyes. "The galaxy is learning that now. They are learning that humans make the best friends in the universe, and they are learning that we make the worst enemies." She looked out at the horizon, where the sun was setting over a world that was slowly coming back to life. Some species see this as a contradiction. They don't understand how we can be so gentle and so fierce. But there is no contradiction. We are fierce because we are gentle. We fight so hard because we love so much. The Keth gave us kindness when we had nothing. That kindness became a seed in our hearts. And from that seed grew something the Velthari never expected, a debt of love that could only be repaid with war. She turned to leave, then paused. "There's one more thing. The Human Council has voted to grant the Keth people special status. You are now and forever under human protection. Any species that threatens you threatens us. Any species that harms you earns our vengeance." Ren felt his heart swell, with emotion he could not name. "Why?" he asked, the same question his grandfather had asked Sarah Chen so many years ago. "Why do all this for us?" Admiral Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked just like her ancestor in the old photographs. "Because you needed help," she said. "That is enough reason." She walked back to her shuttle, leaving Ren alone with the flower and the ashes and the endless sky. He looked up at the human ships orbiting above. He thought of his grandfather, who had shown kindness to strangers and started a friendship that changed the galaxy. He thought of the humans, who had crossed the stars to avenge a people they had never wronged. And he understood something. The galaxy was old. It was full of ancient empires and powerful species who believed that strength was all that mattered. They believed that kindness was weakness, that mercy was foolishness, that friendship was just another form of alliance to be broken when convenient. They were wrong. The humans had taught them a different lesson. They had taught them that true strength comes from bonds that cannot be broken. They had taught them that those who protect the weak are stronger than those who prey on them. They had taught them that friendship, real friendship, is worth more than all the ships and weapons in the universe. And they had taught them one more thing, a lesson that every species in the galaxy would remember for 1,000 years. They had taught them that human friendship is eternal, and human vengeance is worse. 50 years later, Kethos was reborn. The gray skies were blue again. The dead oceans teemed with life. Forests covered the hillsides where ruins had once stood, and in the center of the capital city, rebuilt stone by stone, a great monument stood. It was called the Memorial of Eternal Friendship. On one side, it bore the names of every Keth who had died in the massacre, 7 billion names, etched in crystal that would last forever. On the other side, it bore the names of every human who had died avenging them. Millions of names, human and Keth together. At the base of the monument, 2 statues stood side by side. One was Thalo, the merchant who had welcomed hungry strangers. The other was Sarah Chen, the captain who had accepted his kindness. Their hands were clasped, their eyes looked toward the stars. Ren, now an old Keth with silver-blue skin, stood before the monument with his grandchildren. Human children played nearby, their laughter mixing with Keth songs. The 2 species had become so intertwined that it was hard to say where one ended and the other began. "Tell us the story again, grandfather," one of his grandchildren said. Ren smiled. He had told this story 1,000 times. He would tell it 1,000 more. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a small and gentle people who met some strangers from a distant world. The strangers were hungry and tired and had nothing, and the gentle people helped them, because helping others is the right thing to do." He looked up at the memorial, at the names of the lost and the saved. And those strangers never forgot, not for 100 years, not for 1,000, because that is the way of humans. Their friendship is eternal, and their vengeance. He paused, remembering the war, remembering the fire in human eyes, remembering the fall of an empire that had dared to harm their friends. Their vengeance is worse. The children nodded solemnly. They knew this story. Every child on Kethos knew this story. Every child in human space knew this story. And across the galaxy, other species knew it too. They had learned it in the fires of the human Velthari War. They had learned it in the ashes of an empire. They had learned it in the eyes of human soldiers who fought for people they had never met, died for friendships their ancestors had made. Some species came to the humans seeking alliances. They offered trade and technology and military support. They wanted the humans on their side, wanted that fierce loyalty pointed at their enemies instead of themselves. The humans listened to these offers. Sometimes they accepted, sometimes they did not, but they never forgot what they truly valued, not power, not wealth, but friendship. Other species simply kept their distance. They were afraid of what they had seen, afraid of what humanity could do when pushed too far. These species treated humans with careful respect, like one might treat a sleeping predator. They did not want to wake the beast again. But the wisest species, the ones who truly understood what had happened, did something different. They looked for those who were small and weak and alone. They looked for those who needed help, and they helped them, because they had seen what could grow from a simple act of kindness. They had seen how the Keth, who had given food to strangers, had earned defenders who crossed the stars and broke empires. They had learned the truth about the universe. It was not ruled by the strong. It was shaped by the kind. The lesson was simple. Be kind to humans. Welcome them when they are weak. Help them when they need it. And they will be your friends forever, faithful unto death and beyond. But harm their friends. Harm their friends and learn what humanity truly is. Learn that behind the smiles and the kindness and the open hands, there is something older and fiercer and more terrible than any weapon ever made. Learn that human friendship is eternal, and human vengeance is worse. The Velthari Empire had learned this lesson too late. They had thought the humans were just another species. They had thought friendship was just another weakness. They had been wrong about everything. Now their empire was dust, and the Keth were rebuilding their world under human protection. Now the galaxy knew the truth about humanity. And now, for the first time in 1,000 years, the smaller and weaker species of the universe could sleep peacefully at night. Because they knew that somewhere out there, the humans were watching. The humans who remembered every kindness and repaid it 1,000-fold. The humans who never forgot their friends and never forgave their enemies. The humans whose friendship was eternal, and whose vengeance was worse.